The baby comes into the world grasping, as if to say, the world belongs to me. And when you die empty-handed, open-handed, as if to say, I take nothing with me.
Guys, welcome back to Failure. This is the place where, as they say, success has many fathers and failure has none. Well, failure has found a father, and you're here with us. We're very lucky today to have not only one of the most distinguished leaders in our community in Los Angeles and California and the Jewish community in the United States, but also a dear, dear friend, Rabbi Leder. Welcome, Rabbi Leder, to our show.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
We're really honored to have you. So Rabbi Leder, for those of you who don't know, I think he was recently named in the top 10 most influential rabbis in the world.
No. Newsweek magazine, I don't know how many years ago, a couple of times named me one of the 10 most influential rabbis in America.
In America.
The world is next.
Well, I think America would be the world in terms of, well, I guess.
Well, there's this little country called Israel.
Sorry. Good point. We're already jumping right into it. Also is a best-selling author. His books have helped me and helped many, many people, but also is a member of his congregation. And I have the proud distinguishing point in my life that I was his first bar mitzvah. And that was something that obviously I'll always remember. I don't even know if he remembers. But
every word. Every word.
Sure.
Every word.
Because you had no other bar mitzvahs.
1987.
Yeah.
See?
So for me, it's really, this is a very special episode we have and something that I just feel lucky we have him, especially in today's climate. So Rabbi Leder, kind of jumping right in, the point of failure and as a podcast and as a show is our world, our kids, our adults, they see today in this kind of Instagram world, as I call it, so whether it's Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat or YouTube, everything looks so pretty and perfect and it's quick and everything seems so easy. And really what we hear people talk about all day long is success, and success seems to get more and more material as we go on. It's look at my Ferrari or Lamborghini or, my boat or how cool my life is. And, with today's influencer world, it really speeds up because it's all of a sudden you see 21-year-olds seemingly just snap their fingers and have everything. And I think it's made the world, I don't want to say a shallow place, but a sad place, because you feel, if you don't have that, you're comparing yourself to that and you start to feel like a failure. And so part of the purpose of the show was, having had a lot of failure myself and a lot of success, I always explain that for me, my success is just the things that happen between my failures, those little small moments. And we're bringing on the leaders, and I'd say the people who are most successful in their fields, in you being the most successful in your field, but someone who also deals with every walk of life and in every part of life, to talk about not their successes, but their failures and how it defined their successes. Mm-hmm. And we've touched on a lot of really important topics that come out. Nigel Lithgow, who created American Idol, So You Think You Can Dance, explained his first failure was actually trying to commit suicide when he was 20, and how that defined his whole career. And we got into mental health. And Bryce Hall, who's an influencer, arguably probably the most famous influencer right now, started out by saying, my first failure was when I lost my boxing match. But an hour in, he was admitting he was bullied at school and eating his lunch in the restroom. And it's what led him to doing live podcasting or live becoming an influencer, if you will, because he had no friends. As we get through all this, the first thing I always ask everybody is, what was your first failure you remember? What's the defining moment in your life that you remember saying, oh my God?
Well, first failure and defining moment, they might not be the same.
Defining failure, I would say.
So I was madly in love when I was in high school with this woman. And finally, like halfway through junior year, I closed the deal. And we were together all the way through the rest of high school. and college. And then I went to Israel to start rabbinical school, and she came to Israel. And I was pretty young at the time. I was 22 years old, and I didn't know a lot about relationships, certainly about good relationships, because I grew up with parents who were unhappily married, always. And I didn't pick up the signs that it was falling apart. And then she moved to this little town in Israel to do volunteer work. It's, a very poor little enclave. It's called Hadera. I go to visit her. I get on the bus in Jerusalem. I go there and I walk into her apartment and she's sleeping in bed with some Israeli soldier, right? And
That's crushing.
yeah, I mean, I was a kid and I was shocked. And I felt all the things you could imagine, heartbreak and disbelief and betrayal, and how could I be so stupid and all of that. By the way, it was a torturous ending because then we were together again, then apart, and until the last shred of my dignity was destroyed. Oof. And what I realized was that I could not control everything. And the humility that comes from that is extraordinarily important and instructive. And frankly, deeply spiritual when you give over to the idea that you really don't control very much. And that is terrifying and liberating at the same time. There's always dissonance. There's always duality in life. The thing I've learned the most, I think the most spiritual insight I can ever share with anyone is there is a duality that sustains life itself. There's this dichotomous tension that keeps us moving and alive. Failure leads to success. Success is destroyed by failure. Memory is beautiful and memory is painful. Both. In one of my books, I said it's like being caressed and spat on at the same time. That's memory. We love our parents, we hate our parents, right? We love our kids, we can't understand our kids and they disappoint us. We have this dissonance, this dichotomous tension, as I said. And one of them is, I love this person, but I have no control over this person. And whether or not this person loves me. And this idea that love, frankly, isn't even enough. If you don't love each other, you can't have a relationship. But just because you love each other doesn't mean you can have a relationship. It's the first 50%, but there's a whole nother piece to it. So I would say that moment, that cold water in my face, that was one.
That's a big one at a young age.
It was a big one at a young age. It was painful. It was, as I said, sort of slow and extended torture.
Did it lead? It sounds like, because you said so much, and so much came out of, obviously, I'm not going to say so little, because when you're that age, that's like, the end of your world almost. I went through something similar, but it seems like a lot of what I don't want to say teach today, because I don't.
Well, it comes partly from that, but partly from other experiences. I was in a really, really frightening car accident and ended up not being able, essentially, to walk. I couldn't walk because my spine was injured, and I'd never felt pain like this in my life. When it really hit me, I was in the car, pulled into the garage, and when I tried to get out of the car, it was like there was a knife in my back, and I couldn't stand, I couldn't walk, and so I opened the door and kind of used my upper body and spilled out of the car onto the garage floor, and then I pulled myself with my upper body across the garage floor, through the oil and all of it, and up 3 steps into the house, which leads directly to my study at home. And that I couldn't move. And I was just begging. I was just fetal and begging. And that taught me a lot. That vulnerability taught me a lot.
When was that?
That was about 12 years ago.
I remember when you were kind of going through the rehabilitation of that, and what a hard time that was for
Yes,
you.
and I gave, I think, one of my best sermons. It led to one of my books. The book's called More Beautiful Than Before.
During a very hard time in my life, it actually helped me when I needed it the most.
Yeah, More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us. And I guess what these failures teach, and I can tell you, again, I don't know so much that it's a failure as it is making peace with your limitations. My dad was diagnosed at 75 with Alzheimer's.
I remember this.
And there was nothing I could do but love him, of course, and support and protect. But
Your dad was your world, I remember.
well, there's dissonance there too. He claimed me at a very young age. I have 3 older sisters and a younger brother.
Right.
And my younger brother is gay. And the way my dad saw it, I'm not defending it, I'm just telling you how it is it was all on me.
Oh, because I understand.
And he claimed me at a very young age and set me on a path. I was his, and he was frightening in many ways. And of course, so I have this couch in my office I call the couch of tears.
I've been on it a few times.
Yeah, you have. You have, yeah. So I have not only my own experience, but the vicarious experience of so many others who go through painful things. Now, failure is a source of pain. Pain does not always indicate failure.
Correct.
Right?
Well, the reason, and I want to come back onto this path, but the reason we use failure, and I came up with the word failure, is most people think of failure as a terrible thing.
Yes.
You're a failure, right? You failed. And it hit me pretty late in life. When I say late in life, I'm in my late 40s, but I was about 40-something years old. And it just hit me. I had just failed at my studio. I built a studio from scratch and went into a hostile takeover and put it into a bankruptcy. And I spent 2 years with press literally shitting on me every day, which I later found out was paid for. Press made it even worse by the people doing the hostile takeover.
Yep.
And I always say I was one of those, I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning, sheets over, just didn't even want to look at what was on my phone because I knew it was going to be another article rewritten in the same way. And of all people, the person who called me, actually, you'll appreciate this, is Mel Gibson. Called me and said, "Who did you piss off?" What do you mean? He goes, "What I did was a lot worse, and you're getting worse press, and it's getting written over and over and over and over."
Yeah.
Cut from that, where I thought my life was over. I kind of left the film business, went into tech, went into aviation, went into biotech, but most important, had kids. And I woke up one morning and realized this is the happiest I've ever been in my whole life.
Perspective.
But it also was had I not failed, I never would have had to push forward to find the next success.
Look, if you ask most people about evolution, Darwinism, Alec, if I asked you, can you draw evolution for me? You would probably draw a constantly ascending line.
Yep.
Right? There's a countervailing theory about evolution that biologists call punctuated equilibrium, which means there's a stasis, there's an equilibrium, and then something incredibly disruptive happens, and it punctuates the equilibrium, and there's evolution. There's a leap, an evolutionary leap. So an asteroid hits the Earth, the dinosaurs are gone, but all these other species arrive, right? It punctuated the equilibrium. A car accident, an infidelity, a business failure, the loss of a reputation, the death of someone you love, a parent, a child, a brother, a sister. These things punctuate the equilibrium and they force us to evolve. That doesn't mean they're worth it. Okay? I'm not saying that the price we pay because of that disruption is worth it. What I'm saying is, neither is it worthless. Right? What I say to people is, if you have to go through hell, don't come out empty-handed.
I carry that with me every day.
It's in one of the books. Yes, and I'm not trying to be cute.
No,
we don't get a choice. People we love die.
Right. Well, it goes
hurts.
back to we don't control it.
I think, and for me, being a rabbi, there's so much in the sacred texts that talk about this. You know, we tend to think that people who lived 3,000 or 2,000 years ago had different problems than we do. No, they didn't. The human condition hasn't changed in 3,000 years. We're not the first people to live through a plague. 200, well, more than 200. Not much more than 200 years ago, most children didn't make it to their 5th birthday.
Oh, yeah, 250 years ago, 300 years ago.
Women
Died during
childbirth. There was no epidural and C-section with with Netflix and crushed ice. You were dead.
There's no antibiotics.
No, you were dead.
Yeah.
No anesthesia, right? So death was a regular occurrence in people's lives. Robert Frost had 4 children die. So we can learn a lot from them, from the sages. So much of faith is about what we can and cannot control. You know, when the Bible says, which it often does, da 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 da, I am God. When the Bible says I am God, it is simultaneously saying, and you are not.
Yep.
You are not God. One of my favorite quotes is Marshall McLuhan. He says, I don't know who discovered water, but it wasn't the fish. You're so immersed in your own reality. When does a fish discover water? When it's jerked out of it on the end of a hook and it's flailing and gasping for air. That's when a fish discovers water. When do you discover life? Life in the face of death.
So that brings me to a really interesting, one of the things you've written both, I think in 2 of your books and also in one of the sermons you recently gave, incredibly touching. I think you talked about how you've obviously spent a lot of time celebrating the happiest moments, but also the saddest. You're by people's bedsides as they pass away, which I don't know how you do, because I don't know many people that could actually do that.
You know how you do it? You walk in the door.
I was going to say, the advice obviously you give, as I read, is even if you don't believe it and don't feel it, you show up and you tell them it's going to be okay.
No, not that it's going to be okay. Just show up.
Just show up.
Just show up.
Well, the one thing that stuck with me from that in the biggest way was you said, no one ever said to me when I was by their bedside of that, I don't remember how many hundreds plus people.
Close to 1,000 now.
1,000 people. So, Rabbi, one of the things that I think is so amazing about you, and I can say this as a friend and you as my rabbi, I keep calling you Rabbi Steve, Rabbi. I'm like,
you can call me Steve.
Well, I mean, you bar mitzvah me at 13. I have such a hard time even, but so you are the most relatable person, not just rabbi. And that's why you said you have the couch of tears. And I've been on that couch of tears, whether it's divorce or going through my bankruptcy or, well, not, I mean, company's bankruptcy or, any time in my life, and any time in my family's life and any time in my friend's life, they've all been on Rabbi Leder's couch.
Yep.
And it's not because you're a rabbi. I mean, it's partially because you're a rabbi, but you have this way of connecting with people, and an authentic way of connecting with people who have gone through their failure. And again, like when we were trying to think of what to call the show, the concept of failure. Failure is just that moment of like something didn't work, and I'm just trying to get to the next piece of success, whether it's emotionally or
sometimes it's much more profound and severe than that. I mean, there are people who truly suffer a moral failure.
Yeah.
It's not a mistake. It's not just the next step to success. I mean, I do deal with people whose lives are just turned upside down in an instant because their professed values and lived values aren't aligned.
Well, that's kind of where I was going to get at, which is, you have a way to connect with people and see authentically. I don't want to say the best in them, but you see the best in them, but you see the real in them too. And you also help them. It's like your combination of a rabbi, a therapist, a friend.
You know how I do it? Before I say anything after listening, I ask myself a question internally, which is, where is that same flaw in me? Now, the way that the flaw gets articulated in the world may be different. For me, it might be alcohol, and for someone else, it might be gambling. I don't know. I'm making this up.
Yeah.
But what I try to do is come from a place of empathy, not judgment. And the way I do that is I ask myself the question first. Like, where is that flaw in me? Because then, without revealing too much, although sometimes I reveal quite a bit, now I understand you, Ryan, because I've taken the minute to think about, well, have I been on this same path and this same journey? Of course I have. I ask this sometimes almost rhetorically when people come to me and say, oh, Rabbi, you have no idea what she did, how horrible she was. And I have no doubt that's true. Are you so perfect? Have you never slammed a door? Have you never hurt someone with words? Have you never been a coward? So let's just try to create more empathy and less judgment.
It's really good.
Let's judge less, love more.
If you were talking, I mean, you are talking to hopefully the world. Everybody's going through something. And I don't think...
Everyone. You know, this is a strange feeling for me, honestly. When I'm up there on the pulpit and I'm looking out at a room with 2,000 people in it, I'm not saying this out of arrogance, it's just the job description.
Yeah.
I am the only person in that room who knows what...
Everyone's going through.
Not everyone, but I can look around that room and I can say, oh, cancer, child suicided, third marriage, bankruptcy, cold withholding, narcissistic mother. I can just, diabetes. I can just dial into all of it. And it's a lot.
It sounds
it's
like
a lot to carry.
So how do you carry? I mean, you're carrying, and I'm going to use the failure loosely.
To your point, everyone is suffering. Everyone. That person sitting next to you in traffic or the movie theater or the restaurant, that person is in pain. I promise you, every person here is in pain.
How do you tell or suggest to other people who are going through, their form of failure today, and everybody else around them, people are so quick to judge. People like to,
oh yes,
I hate to say it, but it's like, they say Hollywood loves a
Schadenfreude.
Yeah, Schadenfreude, exactly. So Hollywood loves a falling star more than they like a rising one. But the world somewhat does, and
yes,
it can be a very dark, lonely place. And I know so many people that go through it. What advice? I mean, I think you more than any person that I have had or ever will have on this show has probably heard more of it, seen more of it, to more of an extreme. As you said, you've actually gone through, and I actually would love for you to tell as much of it as you can, the worst of the worst, because people need to hear it.
For me personally?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But let me answer your question. Look, there's no one single approach, but I can give you sort of the broad brushstrokes. The first thing is, if you came to me with some horrible problem like, Steve, I just don't know how I'm going to get through this, I would first probably ask you, well, Ryan, up until this, what was the most difficult thing you ever got through in your life? And everybody knows. Everybody knows. And then I will ask you to tell me about it. And then I will ask you, how did you get through that? Because you did get through it. How? And people will say whatever they say. It may be, well, I relied on my family, and, I relied on my faith, or I leaned more heavily into exercise. You found a way. And I would say, well, I know this seems different than that, but you really have been here before. You really do know how to get through this loss of control or public embarrassment or private shame or some kind of addiction. I said, you actually have been here before, and this is ultimately going to come down to faith in yourself. And, there's this beautiful story in the Talmud. I won't walk you through the whole story. I'll just give you the punchline. The punchline is, the prisoner cannot free himself. One of the things failure teaches is humility. One of the things failure teaches is that we need help. My wife and I were talking about this last night. She's heard me do a lot of weddings. And
including mine.
Yes. Which number was it? No, I'm kidding.
You did.
I did number 1, didn't I?
You did number 1 and Italy.
Yeah.
And then didn't you do? No, number 2
No.
is we just did a.
Yeah.
No, you were there.
Neither.
Yes, you did do it. In Malibu, in the small house.
Oh, well, that was kind of like a precursor. It was the same woman, right?
No.
Yes, it was.
No, there was...
No, neither one of us can remember. How many women have you married?
I don't actually know.
One of the points I make when I talk to couples is, and this is really true of my experience as a husband, as a father, as a son, brother, friend. For most people, the most important things they ever say in their lives are said with the fewest words. I do. It's a girl. He's gone. No. Yes. The most important things we say are said with the fewest words. So Betsy and I were talking about this last night, and she said, and then I talked to couples about saying, don't say I'm sorry. Say, I was wrong. Own it. I was wrong. Please forgive me. I love you. 9 words and you can stay married, assuming you do the work and you mean it. Now, Betsy and I literally last night, we were talking about this and she said, you know what you should add? I need help.
That's a really good one.
Imagine how much less pain as a result of failure there would be in our hearts if we could say, I need help.
That's a great life lesson for everyone. I wish I used it a lot more in my life.
Me too, because the line in the Talmud is, the prisoner cannot free himself. No one suffers pain better alone. But we sometimes require pain to open us up enough to say, I need help.
Like I said, I wish I used it in my life a lot more. And I think for everybody watching, hopefully taking it from the person that's probably helped more people and seen more ups and downs.
Yeah, no one suffers pain better alone. No one.
No.
Pain is literally the only teacher. Pain is the only teacher. Death is the only reason life is meaningful. Kafka said the meaning of life is that it ends.
I mean, you're pretty much defining the reason we're doing this show.
Well, I'm glad you're doing the show because these are things people often don't take the time to think about. And frankly, like here's the challenge of your show, I think. I've always wanted to write a book called How to Have Your Second Child First, right? It's
really
a great
good idea.
title,
I would
isn't
love
it?
to do that.
It's a great title, but you can't write that book. You have to live through the first to calm the hell down for the second, right?
Honestly, it's...
So part of the challenge of what you're doing and what I do, et cetera, is there any way to learn this without the disruption, without the pain, without the broken heart? I don't think so.
Well, I don't think you need, like I said, for me, like success has been the moments in between failure, as I call it, and will always be. But I think we can help people. They don't have to feel as much pain. They don't have to be as scared.
If they're willing to share it. And listen, there's this old Yiddish expression I love, which is when you must, you can.
Yep.
It's amazing
Necessity is that.
what people can get used to. It's amazing what people can endure, overcome, and become as a result of that overcoming. But I'm telling you, if there was no death, there would be no life. You know why people don't like plastic flowers?
Because they don't die.
Because they have no death, they have no life. A flower is beautiful because you know.
Total random side, but did you read yesterday that there was a breakthrough where they've now proven that plants, all plants, have the same neurological system and break up as humans? That they actually show that they have emotions within them that humans have.
I actually know someone who records the sounds of plants.
Really?
Yeah, she's a sound artist. She lives in LA.
I just find it fascinating because I always, as a rabbi, I'm sure you have...
Of course, what are we going to do when all the vegans find out that it's painful, that it's painful to the soybeans when you harvest them? Yeah, where's your compassion now?
was it they say? I really worried that vegans would go hungry because they have so little to feed on. But then I realized how much they feed on their own, what is it, their own
virtue.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found, well, let's not pick on vegans.
No, I'm joking for all you vegans. We're just
but
joking.
I'm just, look. So I think the most important book in the Bible is the book of Job.
Tell me about it.
The book of Job it's a myth. Myth doesn't mean a lie. A myth is a way of describing truth. So it's a myth about an everyman, not a Jewish man, a man named Job, who and this is what's so important about it, the first sentence is, Job was a blameless man. He'd done nothing wrong. So his life falls apart. And it falls apart, it's a mythological setup. Mm-hmm. God is bragging to Satan, look at my noble, loyal servant Job. And Satan says, well, yeah, of course, he has a great life. Of course he's loyal. Fuck with him a little. Then we'll see how loyal he is. So he loses his business, he loses his health, his children die, he loses everything. And he has 3 friends come to visit him. And they say to him, well, you must have been bad. You must have been a bad person or this wouldn't have happened to you. And we already know from the first verse, Job is a blameless man and he's an everyman. He's all of us. And he says to the friends, no, I haven't. To the contrary, I've been really good. That's a lesson in what not to say to someone who's suffering.
Yeah,
by the
you
way.
must have done something bad.
Don't blame the victim.
No.
Ever. So Job decides to make an appeal to God, to essentially put God on trial. Job goes to God and says, what's with that? I've been good. How could you do this to me? Does God defend God's self? No. Instead, God says to Job, are you big? I am. Do you keep the ocean within its shores? Do you make the sun rise? Do you scatter the stars across the skies at night? Try it. In other words, like, who is humankind to expect cosmic justice and earthly justice to be the same? You don't know. You're the fish in the water. Only I understand the larger picture. Now, I don't really like that theologically. Would I ever say to you, if God forbid Tommy got hurt, and I said, well, Brian, I know this is very painful for you, but you have to have faith that it's all part of God's great plan for the universe. I would never say that to you. But I would also, because of Job, be able to say to you, Tommy doesn't deserve this suffering, and neither do you. That's really liberating for people.
I think people need to hear more of that, because again, we live in this world where people just they see so much, it's a narcissistic, self-centered, glossy picture.
I mean, essentially, well, here's how true that is. God says to Job in the book of Job, I make it rain where no man lives. Now, what is God really saying? You're not the center of my concern or universe.
Right.
You're only human.
Yeah. We don't even know
You'll never get it all. You have no idea how this all fits together. I make it rain where there are no people. You think you're the top of the food chain?
That's how we all live, right? We all only live in ourselves, which is why everything's so relative.
And we deify, you've said this 4 or 5 times, so I can tell it's really an important part of what you're trying to achieve here, I think, that the way we define success through things is a mistake. I don't think it's a sin, but I think it's a mistake. And I wrote a book, you can't get it anymore, so I'm not hawking the book, but I wrote it after the dot-com bubble blew up, and it was called More Money Than God. The double entendre was important. When people, I've given a ton of talks about the deification of money, and they always say, Rabbi Steve Leder, blah, 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 the author of More Money Than God. And that's technically true, but it's not how the title's supposed to be pronounced.
More money
than God. Okay? We have deified the material.
We have.
I'll give you a really simple example. Think of any product you can imagine. Anything.
Yep.
And think of the slogan, the advertising slogan. Okay, now, remove the name of the product and put the word God in.
Ooh.
Like a good neighbor,
God.
You're in good hands with
God. Just do it, God.
God, a better idea, right? Now, what does this tell us? It tells us that we have granted deity-like power and faith
In brands.
in things, in the material, as if somehow the material is spiritual. And it's a lie. It's like what I say to people is believing that the material, that your outer life, that what you have is who you are, is your inner life, is like trying to eat a picture of food.
Such a good analogy.
It's idolatry. Think about, what do we write on the back of a dollar bill? Think about that.
In God we trust.
Isn't that weird? I think that's very weird.
So the reason you're right, I did bring it up a lot because I was that. I mean, you knew me.
Of course.
I lived every part of that. I was, I had to become on the Forbes list. I got on the Forbes list.
Yeah.
I had to be the youngest billionaire. I had to have the house in Malibu and the house in Hawaii and the plane and the more I got, the more I kind of went, I got it. Why am I not happy?
Because if you're a person for whom instant gratification isn't quick enough, how could there ever be enough?
Well, I don't think anybody, that's what I realized is, it's funny, I was talking to someone this morning whom actually I want to introduce you to. He reached out to me through Instagram, and he's a Jewish thought leader who's got a lot of followers, and he randomly reached out to me, and he's
What's his name?
come back and put it in because I forgot, but
That's
you'll
okay.
know. He's a young kid who's very successful. When I say a Jewish thought leader,
A thought leader who's a Jew? Or a Jewish thought
an
leader?
actual Jewish thought leader. He has a Jewish Instagram channel that is very focused on helping the Jewish community, but has millions and millions of followers and is also very successful. But he's very young. He reached out to me, and we were talking, and I did an Instagram, and I said, "What can I, how can I help you?" And I looked, and he does a lot of content. I figured he wanted to talk about movies, and he said to me, "I've never said this before." And he said, "You believe me or not?" He's like, "I don't know why I'm feeling this way as I'm talking to you." And I would bet no one's ever done this before. He goes, "I don't want anything from you. I feel like I'm supposed to have a call with you every week and share with you what I've learned." And he goes, "And I didn't grow up super religious. I've only been in the Talmud the last 10 years. And he's not a yeshiva. He's not
but he's also not transactional.
No. And
which is hard to believe.
He said, he said that. He said, you might not believe me, but I don't feel like I'm supposed to ask you for anything. And he goes, I didn't even know I was doing this when I reached out to you. And he said, I just want to share with you stuff because I feel like the things that I'm trying to share with the world, if I share with you, we'll get to the world faster." And what's really interesting is he told me a story. This blew me away. He said, this only happened to me once in my life before. He said, I just moved to New York because I got married. He said, so I had a friend, and I hadn't seen her in 10 years. And it hit me about 7 years ago or 6 years ago. And I don't know why it came in my mind. She had to go to Israel. And she needed to go to Israel, and she needed to go on a kibbutz and go to the specific place and study. And I called her. And he's like, I don't know. It was like, it just hit me. He goes, I'm not psychic. It just kind of came. And it's never happened in my life. And I called her, and I said, what are you doing? She said, I'm in Israel. He's like, what do you mean you're in Israel? And he's like, I was just calling you. He hadn't talked to her in I think he said 10 years, 7 years. I was literally calling to say, I don't know why I had this, and she said, it's funny, I was actually going to go live on this kibbutz, but I'm actually helping teach English to, I forgot, it was a underprivileged, school and blah, 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 blah. Cut to, he ended up moving to Israel 3 years later. They just moved back. That's now his wife. And he told me this story this morning, and I was like,
well,
wow.
Okay, the falling in love stories are always magical.
Right?
They're magical.
Like that one was, to me.
They're always magical. I've done, 800-900 weddings. They're always magical.
The fact that he said that's the only other time in his whole life that he felt something.
Well, how many times have you really felt the essence and the truth of a moment? It's rare.
Interesting enough, so I was explaining to him that now I do a lot.
Because you're open.
Yeah, I hit about 41, just having kids more so than the age. I think going through everything I went through, where I woke up one day and I was like, not only am I happy, I want to be able to put food on the table. I like nice things like anybody else. And I live in a perfectly nice house, and I want a nice car, and sure, I want to travel nice places, but
But you don't put existential meaning in those things. Right.
You know what?
Right. It's kabuki. It's idolatrous.
Yeah.
The deification of the material.
And that's where what hit me about other people too is we can't help it. Our society forces us to feel that way.
Even the best person watching this, the most humble, down-to-earth, balanced, morally clear, best person watching this, is subject to the forces of the majoritarian culture that surrounds us. And by the way, Hollywood and TV play a role in this, right?
A huge
Because
role.
if you think about when my kids were teens,
Yep.
I would watch them watch television.
Yeah.
Remember that Springsteen song, what was it, 57 or 87 channels and nothing on?
Yeah.
Okay, now there are 700 channels.
Or more.
Or more.
Yeah.
Right?
And still there's nothing on.
Right.
Actually, more so than ever.
Right.
There's nothing on.
Right.
We were
'Cause
just
it
talking
just-
about this.
okay,
It's all
but-
shit.
I would watch my kids watch TV, and they watched all these shows,
Yeah.
right? Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, Biggest Loser, Pimp My Ride, Cribs.
Yeah.
Okay, now they all have different titles,
Yep.
but the subtext is identical. And the subtext, the crap they're selling, is that if you change your outer life,
Yeah, you'll be better inside.
it will change your inner life. And it's a lie. But it's hard. Look, when I talk about this, the first thing I do, it doesn't matter how many people there are, I said, before we get started, I'd just like everyone, and we only have 30 seconds for this, I'd like everyone to just turn to your neighbor and share your net worth with each other. That's what happens. Everybody laughs at that. And then I ask, why did that simple request make everyone burst out in nervous laughter?
Yeah.
What is that about? I'll tell you what it's about. Every one of us, because of the majoritarian culture that surrounds us, every single one of us believes that somehow our net worth and self-worth are related. We can't help it.
Yeah.
Now, what we can do is be aware of it. And we can fight against it. I'll tell you a little thing I do remember to fight against it, because I see a lot of powerful people and very wealthy people within their own ecosystem, in their natural habitat.
Yep.
As do you. I also am very ambitious, which you know. Mm-hmm. The synagogue.
Five best-selling books, the biggest synagogue, Jewish center in
America.
Yeah.
Maybe the world. Right?
Definitely the largest, definitely the most impressive I think anybody's ever seen.
Yeah. And it's the only one with, 3 early childhood centers and 2 elementary schools, 2 social services
When you set out to do
centers.
it, everybody said it was impossible. And you did it.
Right. And when I think about that and by the way, it's so difficult to accomplish that I really don't celebrate it, because very few people know what it did to me and what it does to me.
I can only imagine.
To push that thing forward.
I know what it's like to raise money and also have to build the project and then have to deal with the people.
And the day job is absorbing all this pain and carrying it.
I don't know how you did it.
So, okay, poor me. It's a big gig, right?
No, but I actually
it's a lot.
don't know how you
I don't
did it.
know either, and that's part of why I'm going to have a second career and do something else, because I'm burnt out.
I think you should be a motivational speaker, Mike. I'm serious. You think I'm joking?
No, I am.
I know, but
I don't think you're joking.
I
am a motivational speaker.
I think you should actually be on. You're a motivational speaker to the Jewish community and beyond.
I'm getting there. Yeah.
I think you should continue. I mean, you've done.
Anyway, the point is this: when I graduated from rabbinical school, the day before graduation, I went to the handful of professors and my teachers who I really respected and admired the most, and I asked them, what, in your opinion, is a successful rabbi? Because that's a hard thing. What are the metrics?
Good question, yeah.
Right?
What
is a successful rabbi? The best answer I got was from my Hebrew literature professor, who was not a rabbi. His name was Ezra Spicehandler. I studied Hebrew poetry with him. He was genius. And he said to me, a successful rabbi is a person who fundamentally changes at least 3 people's lives in the course of his or her career.
Wow.
And
I'd say you probably changed at least 300, I know.
What I'm saying is that how you define success is an enormously important life journey. And it is not about stuff. You know, there's a chapter in one of my books called "Nobody Wants Your Crap," and the double entendre is intentional. I know 2 Jewish firefighters, both belong to the congregation.
3 actually.
Well, I mean, they do it full time. You just, I mean, I know what you like the gear. Right? I know. So I asked one of them, his name was Paul. I said, Paul, when people really have to get out, like now, what do they grab? He didn't hesitate. He said, people, pets, and pictures. Mm-hmm. Now, think about that.
Memories, people. Pictures
are of zero material value. What's your favorite picture in this house?
It's such a hard, I can't even answer it because...
Give me a couple.
There's one of me and Tommy and Harrison. There's another one of my grandparents, the ones who survived the Holocaust. And there's another one of my Nana, my Nana who called me my bad boy when she was about 102 and me.
And those pictures are not of material value. They're vessels for memory.
Yeah.
They're vessels of memories. The time we spent is what you're really trying to grab and hold on to. So I think that this idea, it's not mine, Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote about it in the 50s, this idea of the architecture of time, the sacredness of time, the holiness of time. The first time the word holy is used in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, is not in relation to a thing.
It's in relation to time.
And God rested on the 7th day and called it kadosh, holy. Everything else is good or very good. Time is sacred and holy. And if you can live your life, and none of us can all the time. A, we have to make a living, and B, we're in this culture that says more is better, and net worth and self-worth are intimately related. But when you are mature enough or have lost enough, taken enough bullets to realize that how you define success changes so much and gives you so much more control. This leads me to what I think my next book is going to be about, but I'm not sure. I'm not feeling it yet to write it because it's a nightmare to write a book. But when you redefine success, you recontextualize failure too, of course. There's this concept in Western culture that sacrifice is bad. Like, oh, he made so many sacrifices. Oh, he made the ultimate sacrifice. You've sacrificed so much. That's the Western view. Now, the biblical view, the Hebrew word for sacrifice, which is korban, comes from the root to draw near, to be close. Korban is sacrifice. Krovim are relatives. Kiruv is to gather in. Okay, so this idea is completely antithetical to the modern notion of sacrifice, which is a net loss. Okay, we think of sacrifice as a net loss. Well, you sacrificed a limb or whatever, right? The biblical view is sacrifice is a net gain because through it we grow closer.
Sacrifice teaches us. We get more. Not get more. We give to get more. You are more. There you go.
Right? The goal is not to have, but to be. Right? You are more. Now, I'll ask you a couple questions. Let's flip the script.
That's failure, by the way. Sacrifice, in a way.
In a way, that's when, but if you redefine it, which I do, as success. So I'll give you an example, or you'll give us an example. What are the 2 things that mean the most to you in your life? Like that.
My kids.
Your kid, let's make that 1.
Okay.
What's second?
My family.
Okay. Your kids and your family. What are the things you've sacrificed the most for in your life?
Now?
Over the year, what?
Well, originally business. Before I had kids and family. Definitely business.
But they became most important.
Now it's my kids and my family.
Bingo. So what have we just discovered?
What you sacrifice, what you get that's most important is what you give is most important.
The things that mean the most to us
Are the
are the things we sacrifice the most for. That's what draws us near. So my next book, I'm not sure what the title is going to be. Right now, I'm thinking of How Love is Made.
It's a good title.
So it's counterintuitive. You see, it's not that we sacrifice for the people we love. It's that we love people because we sacrifice for them.
I mean, yeah, like any father or mother would give everything for their kids and also get the most from them.
And so this redefines failure. You only fail if you're not giving, if you're not sacrificing, and you have control over that.
That is, I think you put it in the best words I've heard. So I always say my life actually didn't really start until I had my kids. And it wasn't even the day that Tommy was born. It was like a year in when I kind of really realized my life it's not it didn't matter, but like...
it was real love.
It was real love and...
Born of sacrifice.
Yes.
Right? Babies are born in pain. They're created in love and born in pain. And you sacrifice for them. And let me tell you something about parenting, okay? Since I'm your old rabbi buddy, it never ends.
Now they say, what do they say? You're only as happy as your least happy child, right?
Until the day you die. It never ends. So once you get this idea that love is something you make through giving, then that changes how you see your life. And it enables you to live a life of nothing but success.
That is how I wake up every day, only because my success is purely how good of a father am I. That's how I look at it.
And you know what? It's born of a broken heart.
Yeah.
Here's another, I won't get too
No, I love this because this
is... Too rabbi-like on you. But so there's a verse in the Bible that says God puts God's words upon our hearts. And the rabbis ask a really interesting question, which is, why upon our hearts and not in our hearts? I mean, surely if God has the power to put words on your heart, God has the power to put words in your heart. And the answer they give, which I think is so powerful, the answer they give is, God puts words upon our hearts. And it isn't until our hearts are broken that the words can enter.
Wow.
In other words, in a way,
he puts it there, but
we're more whole when we're broken.
I think that's very true.
I'm not telling you it's any fun.
No.
But I'm telling you it's something other than failure.
You know, I remember, I don't know if you remember this. You came to the hospital. My wife, Jessica, was in the hospital with Tommy. She'd been on bed rest. Couldn't get out of bed for 6 months because she went into premature labor. I think she'd get out for 5 minutes a day or 10. My company had just had the hospital taken into bankruptcy, and I was working out of the hospital trying to keep it out of bankruptcy or get it back out of bankruptcy. And I remember you came in, and in my mind, my life was over. Like, I wasn't sure if my child was going to make it.
Right.
It was front page of every paper, being kind of shit on, thinking I was never going to get this back. In fact, I remember right when you walked in, I just told Carl Icahn to go fuck himself and hung up because he was supposed to help me and then was going to try and steal it. And I remember you came in and you said, first of all, you said, "This too shall pass," which was and I stopped. I was like, that's what my nana would say, which I don't remember the exact words, but more or less you said, I know everything feels inescapable or uncontrollable right now. And it wasn't that it happens for a reason, but I promise you, when you look back on this, it won't be as bad as you think it is. And you'll grow from it. It was something to that extent.
Well, I think about these things almost like, have you ever been like face to face on the dock with one of those massive cruise ships?
Oh yeah.
Okay. As they head out to sea, they do become smaller.
It's true. And smaller until they go.
Yeah. And we do have this amazing ability to normalize things. During COVID, I remember saying on the talk shows and everything, and I was saying, look, this is a risk that's new, and therefore we haven't been able to normalize it. But you get on the 405 every day, and you're a lot more likely to die there. It's just that you've normalized it. You've learned to live with it. We are going to learn to live with this too, which we did, because human beings are amazing. Because when you must, you can. And it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, But it does, if you live a certain kind of life, it takes the sting out. If you have people who love you and will support you, if you're willing to ask for help, if you've led a life of giving, of sacrifice, it doesn't change the decree. It doesn't change what happens to you, but it changes the way you go through what happens to you.
You know, what's very interesting about that is, you know, I like you, I studied physics, and I remember you did your
my rabbinical thesis was on
Einstein, and
yeah.
he's, as you know, he's my hero.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I ever told you this, so everybody in the world's going to see this, but I have a tattoo.
Really? I'm not sure I want to see it, but please continue.
It's E equals MC squared on my back, actually, which I made a confession to a rabbi.
You're not the first.
I've been reading a lot about some of the more recent breakthroughs in physics and quantum physics, which is my hobby. And, you know, there's this notion, wave-particle duality, which I'm sure you've studied. And there's a notion now that the reason we can't observe wave-particle is that we see in 3D, obviously, and the world actually exists in 5, 6, or 7D. And so it's not, you know, time is relative. So the past isn't the past, the future isn't the future, and there really is only the present, and that's it. And a lot of people who, Michel Kaku's of the world, these big physics, I'll call them scholars, trying to help people say, you know, the past happened, but it doesn't have to always have happened. Meaning, every second you get to choose your new path. And it's kind of...
Well, yeah, the way I put it to people, when people come to see me, let's say you were coming to see me about some moral failure or business failure or whatever, could have, should have, would have, the first thing I would say to you to triage the experience, I mean, what I'm about to say is a blunt instrument,
yeah,
but you got to start there.
Yep.
To get you headed in the right direction. I would say, I don't know about you, Ryan, but personally, I've given up all hope of a better past.
That's a great, I'm going to use that line from now on. I'm stealing it for sure.
Think about it. It immediately points you in the right direction.
And
it's triage.
It's interesting because it's triage and it's metaphysical and it's scientific. And when I say scientific, the whole theory now, that I say the whole theory, one of the many theories, but there are actually a lot of science behind it, and Einstein's equations hold true. That is, you know, we actually can effectively live any path out of any probability. And part of what we do to ourselves by sticking ourselves in the past and getting stuck in the failure.
Past is prologue.
Exactly. We're picking the future.
Yeah. And to the world.
Right. Infinite dimensions.
Infinite dimensions, because we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are.
Correct. We see the world from our eyes.
Only.
We just talked about this on our last show, actually, where, I don't know if you ever studied Cooley, sociologist and a psychiatrist, but I just remember from college, he was a...
Stevie, was he the guy, the bowling alone guy? No, that was...
No.
Yeah.
He was, like, just prior to Freud, he created the looking glass self. We don't see ourselves... We think we see ourselves.
Yeah.
We see ourselves the way we think other people see us. And he calls it the looking glass self. So when we're looking in the mirror, we're actually looking at what we think other people see.
Right.
And it's an interesting, when you put yourself in that.
Well, let's just say that, I mean, it's all relative.
It's all relative.
Okay. And this, again, is why less judgment and more empathy is such a powerful way to live.
It's like words I wish the whole world, in a way, could go through their painful moment early in life. The world would be such a better place. And
but it takes time. It takes time. You have to have the time to assimilate it and embrace it. In other words, when you're cracked open by something painful or disruptive, you call it failure. I call it life.
Yep.
It takes a while. I'll tell you something. When I was, 30 years old, I decided to start a men's group at the temple, and I called it 100 Jewish Men. And I invited 100 men, ages 25 to 80. And we got together once a month, and we talked about things that men would never talk openly about with women in the room, and that were unique to men. And one of the things we did was called an age circle. So the youngest guy stands here, the next youngest here, all the way across. So the oldest guy and the youngest guy are shoulder to shoulder. And then we got to ask questions across the circle.
What a cool idea.
So when you're talking across the circle, you're talking to someone either 30 years older or 30 years younger.
That's really cool.
And everybody got to ask a question. So I was 30, I'm looking at these 60-year-old guys, and I say to them, you know, already in my short time as a rabbi, it had been like 3 years, I said, it's very clear to me that men in their 60s and 70s are the happiest, the most content, the most at peace with themselves and their life and what they will and will not accomplish and be and do. And then I looked at him and I said, is there anything you guys over there can tell us over here about how to achieve that state without having to live all the years it takes to get to stand where you are? 20 guys all look at me and they go like this. Nope. Can't have your second child first.
It's such a great, you definitely need to write that book. Because that is such a great, like, as you said, I even laughed.
You can't write the book.
No, you can't.
It's a great title, but you can't write the book.
No, but the book should actually be called that. You can't have your second child first. You know, yeah. You and I share something that I don't think we've ever talked about. When I was 14, I was diagnosed with anxiety disease. And it was like the hardest thing I ever went through. And I've lived it my whole life. And when I was a kid, it wasn't okay. Like, anxiety wasn't a thing. It took 2 years of me telling my parents I have that feeling, and a shrink one day said, you know, he has anxiety disease, and, you know, my dad, like, it's like, no, you don't.
It's a fake disease.
Go do it. That's not real. That's, you know, in your brain. And I've my whole life had it. And I actually think back on a lot of the things that I would have, you know, it's interesting because I don't go back and think I wish I would have done something differently. And even recently.
You couldn't have, because you can't have a better past.
I really, you can't. But more than that, I often think, you know, like, okay, well, in this metaphysical world, if I could have had, you know, there's all these different lines and I could have had this alternate timeline, what would I have changed? And it's actually nothing. In my mind, it's nothing. But the one thing I do think about are little things. Like, I didn't do that because I had anxiety. And it's not a big thing I didn't do. It's actions. Like, when I was in business and even the peak of my career, and even when certain things weren't going well, one of the biggest complaints I got was not calling people back. And they thought I was doing it because I thought I was too good or too big, and it wasn't that. It was
you were afraid.
Anxiety. I oftentimes would cancel last minute for a party or an event, and people thought, oh, he's rude. It was anxiety.
Yeah.
To this day.
You were afraid.
Yeah. And I wish, when I think back, that's the thing I wish I could change, is because that I could have changed very easily. It would never have changed an outcome. Maybe it would have, maybe it wouldn't. But, you know, it was the fear.
You suffered too long.
I still have it, but I've learned to live with it. And you have it.
I came out about it because I suffered too long. You know, the problem or the challenge of an underlying anxiety disorder is it's also your friend, because I treated every day of work as if it was my last, because I was going to get fired if I didn't crush it, outperform every other rabbi in all of American Jewish history every day, return every call, raise every dime, write books, run a congregation, all driven by anxiety. And so the very thing that makes you successful is the same thing that enslaves you. And that's, again, another duality, right? It's so when I said dualities drive life forward, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So what happened in my case is this was in 2020. Now, I'd had it my whole life. I grew up afraid, in a house full of fear.
Yep.
My dad used to say things like, when I hit, I break bones. Who says that to a 6-year-old?
Yeah, it's tough.
Who says that?
Yeah.
And when I would come home from college, and we weren't poor, we just lived like we were poor. Because my dad grew up on what was then called public assistance, SNAP, essentially. I would come home from college and my dad would say, come here. And we'd walk out in the backyard and he'd say, under that tree, I buried some gold coins. God forbid we should ever have to buy bread. So I have all of this. Always had all of this, and never understood it, except it drove me hard. Okay? That's how I did it. You asked, I don't know how you did it all, how you do it all.
Yeah.
That's how. Fear, anxiety. Now, in 2020...
It eventually catches up to you.
Oh, it always catches up to you. I behaved in very dysfunctional ways. I was belittling, I was judgmental, I was tough on the young rabbis around me. Why can't you do what I can do? I grew bitter inside because they couldn't be what I wasn't nice. I got away with it because I was nice externally, but internally, I was burning up. And when I had this car accident, I had the spinal surgery and all of that, I thought, I'm not going to be able to be at work what am I going to do? They're going to get rid of me.
Yeah, that anxiety is the worst.
Okay, so then, in 2020, the day before Trump leaves the White House, the day before, I had stayed above the fray for 4 years. I said to the congregation, I'm not a pundit. I'm not going to talk about these things. It's not productive.
I remember, actually.
Yeah, and I don't know any more than you know.
I remember when you said that.
Yeah, you can read the Wall Street Journal.
Yep.
I can read the Wall Street Journal.
I actually remember it was kind of part of your sermon, but it was kind of before. It was like, I'm not involved in this.
No.
It's not my job.
And this is called a sanctuary for a reason.
Yeah.
We're not going to have it here.
I kind of remember you telling people, like, it's not a place to debate this stuff.
That's right. So then, the day before Trump left the White House, he issued all the pardons. And for the first time in the history of the United States, he also published a list of everyone who wrote a letter supporting the pardon of every person he pardoned.
And you had written a letter?
And I had written a letter for someone.
Who? I bet I can guess who.
I'm sure you can. And he deserved it.
He did deserve it.
Because he changed his life. Because I worked with him. Because I knew the inside of it.
Yeah.
That no one else knew.
Yeah.
And because I understood in a way no one else understood except his family, what the consequences of no pardon would have been. And this is a person who changed his life because of his mistakes. And also, I'm not the judge. I'm not the jury. I'm not the president.
You're also just writing
I didn't
you
say,
feel.
Yeah.
You said,
I was writing based on experience.
Yeah, I see firsthand witness of a person who deserves something as a rabbi.
That's right. So it gets published, and I had no idea, of course. It never happened before. I would have written the same letter, but I would have been prepared.
Yeah.
And Mara, my social media manager, my phone rings. She says, did I just hear your name on MSNBC? And I said, I don't know. Maybe. Why? And then it starts pouring out. And then, because the hatred for Trump.
People gave you shit for that?
You have no idea.
But you would have written it whether it was a Republican, Democrat,
I would have written it.
And by the way, for someone who's a great family person and deserved it.
I would have written it to Obama for David Geffen, okay?
Yeah,
not that he needed it, but and they would have thrown a parade for me down Wilshire Boulevard.
Yeah.
But it happened to be Trump, who is obviously a polarizing figure, and a Republican, and people couldn't, they lost their minds. First of all, people in groups lose their minds.
Yeah.
We're seeing that now.
Yeah.
They lose their minds.
Yeah.
I always subordinated the anxiety that was locked in the basement of my psyche with hard work. I just kept working hard, and that kept the anxiety in the basement. It was always, right? It was always pounding on the ceiling of the basement with a broomstick, like, we're here, we're animating you, but it was locked in the basement. For whatever reason, this experience flung the basement door of my psyche open, and the anxiety rushed out. And I was paralyzed. I lost 10 pounds. Oof. I was putting out fires of people who I thought loved and trusted me, but who were so blinded by their hatred and so deeply moved by the people who stood up for me. I had a board member who said, I will not be on a board of a synagogue that tells the rabbi what he can and cannot say. I had people say and do the right things, and I had people who
I can't believe the board would even question you. Like, what's wrong with that?
It was you try to remember the ethos.
I know it's polarizing, but you weren't supporting a Republican or Democrat, or you were just writing to the president.
People lose their minds. And by the way, I didn't invent the presidential pardon, which I think is a weird thing and probably not appropriate, but I didn't invent it. Anyway, the important thing is that despite that unleashing of an underlying anxiety disorder that I kept suppressed, I had been seeing a psychiatrist since the car accident.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want to live like this. I cannot live like this.
It's so debilitating.
So he started me on Zoloft.
Same thing I'm on.
And then, so I take 125 milligrams of Zoloft.
I took 150, I'm down to 100.
Yeah.
But I've whole life been on, I've been on every one of them, and I went through until I found the one that worked.
I think that we should put Zoloft in the water supply like fluoride.
I'm in total agreement with you.
So what happened was, you know, I was still suffering, really suffering, and it was getting a little better, and then, I don't know, 8 weeks into it or something, someone said to me, "Hey, Steve, how you doing?" I said, "Great." And then I went,
Yeah, it takes
"Great?
about 2 months to kick in.
Who's that guy? Great. What? So then I decided it was Mental Health Month. You know, there are all these months in America. So it was Mental Health Month, and it was time for me to do one of my Today Show segments. And I said, this is what I want to talk about. I want to tell the truth about what happened to me. And I want to share with people that store-bought is fine. We need to destigmatize. You know, I need these,
Yep.
or I could never be a rabbi.
Yeah.
Nobody cares
Yeah.
because we've normalized it.
Yeah.
If you had diabetes, you wouldn't hesitate to take insulin.
No.
You wouldn't. Nobody. Why does this have to be something other than normalized? It wasn't in a gratuitous or voyeuristic kind of way. There was nothing sensational about it. It was just the truth. I was suffering. I needed help. I sought help. I got help, and it changed my life. And did it reduce my ambition a little? Yes. Is that a great trade?
Yeah.
Yes.
All day long. As someone who suffers from anxiety, all day long.
All day long.
Interesting that, because you kind of
Remember how we started? That when someone comes to me to talk about what they perceive as a failure, the first thing I do is ask myself, where is that in me?
Yeah.
Because that enables me and others to realize, like, you're not alone. The calls after that episode, the parents reaching out at me to help with help, you know, needing help for their kids.
It triggered a lot, right?
A lot. And I'm so glad, because if one anxious kid got on Zoloft because of that episode, and I know many more than that did, then Ezra Spice Handler's
3 people.
admonition was right.
So, you know what's crazy about that is it took your boiling point, as I call it, for you to face it. Even though I was diagnosed at a young age, and it was just not talked about. Like, even though my family, you know, my dad put me on a rigorous program at 14. Like, didn't want to go to school. I remember I did a school paper or school project. It was supposed to be your family tree. And as my family always made me do, I had to overachieve and did this book this big, not the 2 pages. And it was called Me, Myself, and I. And I went back like 6 generations. And
it was full of trauma, right?
Full of trauma.
You come from a Holocaust family.
Yes. And I realized, I just remember realizing everybody dies. I was 13 years old, Everybody dies. What's the point? And I wouldn't do anything. I didn't want to go to school, and I wouldn't. And if I did, I just basically would go cry. And my parents couldn't figure it out, and no one had ever heard of, there was no anxiety disease. And
right.
I went to 5 or 6 different shrinks, and they found this one specialist said he has anxiety disease. And of course, my dad, because there's no such thing as anxiety disease. It's not a disease. And he created a program, like a military-like program.
Yeah, he's going to make a man out of you.
He did, actually, and to his credit, it worked in the sense that I could live a normal life. It started with, you're going to school today for 1 hour. You're going to school next week. We're going to go to 2 hours. Then you're going to 3. You're going to go play tennis. You're going to
CBT.
Yes, exactly. And it worked. But it didn't take away the anxiety. It just helped me kind of, I guess, live a normal life, if you will. And
like my workaholism. It didn't get rid of it, but
Right.
it subordinated it.
Well, it's funny because I was going to say eventually later in life, when I was around 20 and I was running the hedge fund early on, and I just decided to go see a shrink on my own and get on medicine, which I hadn't, they put me on medicine when I was 14, and they got me off as quickly as they could. And, I always should have been on it, and I got on it. And even getting on it, I went into do you remember I worked 24 hours a day, starting at 22, 23.
Yes, I did too, but with less sense of terror and panic.
So I
not everything was a 10.
Yeah, it took it to a 5 for me, I'd say.
Right, that's huge.
But I still had the terror and panic. Mine was always around money, though. And I didn't realize it until a point in life when I realized the trigger, like as you talked about, you had a trigger that just was the boiling point, and that was this letter for you. And for me, it was money. Having money somehow made life okay, and not having money or having less money was like, the thought of that was debilitating.
Right, because you believed money could protect you.
Yes. And also not when I was going through the bankruptcy, and I always say bankruptcy, and the relativity was going through the bankruptcy, and I was waking up every morning, and I didn't, I was on a plane 237 days a year before that for 5 years.
I remember those days.
Yeah. And now I'm waking up and I'm working from the house, and I'm having a board meeting, and I'm fighting with lawyers, and I'm having to look myself in the mirror. And I remember, it was open up this just the worst anxiety I think I ever remember. I started drinking too much. I was like, I'd never had a drink during the day my whole life.
You have to suppress the anxiety somehow.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember I lived in this giant house in Brentwood, and I was like, why am I living in this giant house? I hated it.
Yeah.
I had a huge bar, and I remember I walked behind the bar one day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I took a shot of vodka. And for probably a good 2 months, I'd go take a shot of vodka at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
It's called self-medicating. And everyone does it. Everyone does it.
Well, and I've realized the world has more anxiety today. I think because of, I think it's again going back to this Instagram perfection we've created. People have anxiety about, I have to be better, I have to be that, why am I not that? This person's doing so good, but also the world's in total chaos. People are scared.
The world has always been in total chaos.
It's true, actually.
If you think people who lived 3,000 years ago didn't have anxiety, look, 3,000 years ago, you had no reason not to expect to die by flood, fire, earthquake, robbery,
famine,
rape, slavery, famine. Half of all children didn't live to be 5 years old.
It's so crazy.
Right? So there was huge anxiety. And the rabbis, they knew all the praying in the world didn't keep people alive. So it was about how to go through something, not how to avoid it, because you cannot avoid it. And that's, at least for me, look, I don't know what I'd be like without the Zoloft, but I don't need to know. I don't want to know. I don't have to know. I know that it would have changed my father's life if he had it. His fear of poverty, my fear of poverty.
Same fear I have, actually.
Yes. Well, it's in our DNA.
Yeah. Well,
it's in our
as
DNA.
You know, my dad, grew up working in a shoe store when he was 10, and I actually wish, I've begged my dad, whom you know well, to get on anti-anxiety. But he doesn't realize he has anxiety, and he does what you did now at 70, whatever times 10. He works 23 hours a day.
Yeah.
If he's not working, he's working out.
I used to see him at the gym all the time.
Still exactly the same.
His knee was screwed up, and there he was still. And I remember, this is very interesting. You just stimulated a memory of mine. I was not there. I'd go a couple times a week. And I remember talking to your dad. I said, Jack, how are you? I see you every time I'm here. And he looked at me and said, you have to do this every day.
Yeah.
And he said it like, Rabbi, what?
Yeah, no, it's...
You have to do this every day. And I thought, I'm not doing this. I can't do this every day.
He does.
I don't even like doing it.
I'm the same as you.
You know? Give me the Ozempic, bro.
Put a coupon right here for Ozempic.
Store-bought is fine. Store-bought is fine.
You know what's really funny you say that is they were just visiting me, and he was complaining. They stay with me now that they moved to Florida, and he was like, Leslie, it's my mom, his name is,
Yeah.
for those, he's like, did you see this? So they've just moved into a building in Florida. The gym is closed for a week and a half during the holidays.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's completely goes
I
into
know.
a panic
Yeah.
that the gym in his building is
Because
closed.
that's how, look, the endorphins do it for him.
Yep.
Your dad's an endorphin freak.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But we all got to do something because life is a state of anxiety. And by the way, that's what kept our ancestors alive.
It's the fight or flight. Yeah.
Our DNA survived because we are the descendants of people who lived like there was a tiger behind every tree.
Well, and that's the irony of I think, I know we're getting a little into mental health and anxiety, but the fear of failure, frankly, because for me that's what it is.
The unacceptability.
The unacceptability, the fear, the shame.
Yes.
Oh my God! And what's really interesting is the very guy, my father, who was a great father, and I love. I'm not blaming him because his parents were in camps, 14 and 19. They didn't even have a childhood. He was working in a shoe store when he was 10.
Yeah.
But the guy who is like, oh, there's no anxiety. Like now I look and I'm like, oh my God, he is the walking epitome of anxiety. Now he'll tell me I don't have anxiety.
I know, but
He'll
he
say
does.
it's
Of course he
about
does.
this or business or
Listen,
that.
I grew up with this dad. Like if you weren't working till you dropped,
Yeah.
you were a wuss. But now I know why he did that.
Yeah, same. I'm watching him do it, and I'm telling
and it
him.
would have changed his life. But here we are again.
He won't. My mom even, and she's like, I wish your dad would. He won't see it. I wish your dad would. But
He's the fish in the water, right? But he may still have an event that cracks him open. It could happen. I'm not wishing for it because you know what? None of this is worth it. But I wish I hadn't gone through what I went through.
He had the event that cracked him open, and it pushed him to work even
harder.
He's 75. He's chairman of 12 companies.
It
wants to add a 13th.
It didn't crack him open.
He cried.
It made him more so. This is another kind of myth that we can implode.
He's the boiled egg to the epitome.
Most people think that these traumatic experiences, failure, etc., gives people a new personality. It doesn't. It makes everyone more so.
Yeah.
Heinrich Heine was a German poet. He had this joke about Jews. He said, the Jews are like everyone else, just more so. Right? And I have found, and I've written mostly about pain and transcending it and finding meaning and loss. Let's take the death, for example. Death doesn't give a family a new personality or a new way of functioning, right? If you're a big, warm, happy family in life, you're going to take care of each other that way in death. If you're a dysfunctional, bitter, bickering family in life, you're going to be a bitter, dysfunctional family in death. It makes everyone more so. This is true of what you would call failure. But if you can redefine, and I know I'm repeating myself, but it's so important if you can redefine success. I'm not interested in people who haven't failed. They're boring. I have nothing to talk to them about. You and I, we could talk for weeks.
We could talk for weeks,
right?
for sure.
We could.
You know that I won't hire someone in a senior position that says they haven't failed.
How?
That's the first question I ask is tell me your biggest failure. And if they're like, well, I haven't failed, I'm like, you're.
And who has no sense of their own finitude. This too, this changed my life. My father's death changed my life. So I had to move from being Steve Leder, the rabbi, to Steve Leder, the son.
It's going to be hard.
This was about the only thing that could do it. Because of how connected, for good and for bad, with all the dissonance I was with my father from a very young age. Now, to really understand the power of this, you have to know a little something, which is that my father and I looked physically identical at each age. So if you saw a picture of me when I was 10 and a picture of him when he was 10, other than what we were wearing, you would not have been able to tell the difference.
Wow.
Okay? You see these bags?
you did it from your dad?
That's my dad. People say to me, Rabbi, you're on camera and these things. We could. I said, no. This is my dad. It's the day of my dad's funeral. I'm in Minneapolis. We're sitting in the library at this synagogue that they belong to. We're waiting to go and see my father's body in the casket before they close it, and then we open up and start the whole thing. The young rabbi walks in, and I remember saying to myself, I know exactly how the rabbi feels right now. I have no idea how I feel. And then we approach, we go in. I'm one of five. We have 5 siblings. Our spouses were there, my mom, and we approach the casket. I approached the casket. Now, keep in mind, I had done this as the rabbi. This is no hyperbole, at least 1,000 times. I had stood next to families, standing next to them as they looked at their loved one's dead body.
You've been there. You've been there through many of ours.
Yes, and to be honest with you, like, I care, but I'm not really feeling it.
No, it's part of your job as a rabbi.
Yeah, and it's not my loved one.
Right.
You know, I could eat a sandwich and do that, honestly. Because as a rabbi, you have to have a shard of ice in you that enables you to help people despite everyone's pain.
You need to detach and be able to give advice.
I approach the casket, and I look down at my dad, his body, and I put my hand on his chest because I wanted to touch him, but I knew his skin would be cold, and I just didn't want to feel that. And then I looked down and I thought to myself, that's how I'm going to look when I'm dead.
Wow.
And my son is bending over my casket. I am going to die. I'd done 1,000 funerals, Ryan.
You just hit
I was
that moment.
57 years old. But it wasn't until that moment that I realized I am going to die. And that realization, that cracking open, changed my life for the better.
What was the biggest takeaway you had from that in terms of change your life for the better?
I decided I was going to retire and do something else that wasn't quite so marrow-sucking.
I was wondering when you made that decision.
That was a big part of it, because I was 2 years into a 7-year contract, and in that moment I said, I too much. And I have other things that I'm interested in, and I actually love my wife and my kids, and I want to be with them for 48 weekends a year for 38 years.
Yeah.
It's funny, I'm talking to like as many smart people as I can about what they think I might do next and where my skills might be of use. And I still have to make money. So I've got to figure it all out. It's the first time in my life I've ever let go of one trapeze and the other one isn't there. Never before. Okay, I've had one job.
Some would call that faith, Rabbi.
Well, it is. Yes, I do have faith in myself. But it changed the way I think about money. It caused me to start to engineer my runway out. It helped me clarify what matters. And you would think I knew all of this, but you know what? You can't have your second child first. You've got to experience this kind of loss to realize fundamentally in your heart, in your soul, in your bones, you don't have forever. That's not a theoretical concept. It's a fact.
So, you realize what's very interesting about this is you started out talking about
the meaning of life is
meaning
that
of life
ends.
is death, and it ends. And
it's
that's when you realized
it's the only thing that makes life matter. Imagine a deathless life.
You wouldn't care.
It wouldn't be life.
You'd basically be like every vampire in every movie, just kind of doing whatever you want to do without caring. You made the decision to do it based on events, and I kind of got forced into it. And I think of it as the luckiest thing that happened.
However you get there.
I went through this terrible, not a death, thank God, but it was.
Well, it was. It was the death of your company.
It was, a death of something that I started with nothing and was told it would be impossible.
A death of the image you had constructed.
And it's funny because I didn't even, it was constructed for me somewhat, meaning like I came into this business that was told you can never make it.
It's a little of both.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
you understand optics.
Yes, I But remember, when I came in the business, I had $0 and no connections in it. So,
well, yeah, you built it.
I built it and, brought in, I think, significant change to it and was put, up here every day.
You were a wunderkind.
Yeah. And
it's a hard way to live.
It's really hard because every day you have to be better. And, I was the first $1 billion producer and the first showman of the year. And it's like, then what's next? And then it's like, oh, now you're Forbes and then you're Fortune. And it's like,
we all have it. Imagine being the rabbi.
No, I can't. That's why I say
imagine being a symbolic exemplar. And imagine representing something you could never, ever fully achieve. No one is that good.
I could never, because when I was here, I was still looking up to you saying, I need you. And I was looking around and all the people that were next to me in the business were sitting there saying, I need you. And they're all right there in the congregation.
But also, and imagine representing an ideal
that's supposed to be perfect.
Is impossible to achieve.
It's actually supposed to be perfect. If you think about it, God is perfect in people's minds.
I mean, there's a lot about the importance of imperfection in the tradition. We break a glass at the end of a wedding and all kinds of things.
But God himself is supposed to be perfect, and you're delivering these messages that
people project a lot onto. So it's a very weird role. But yes, we construct these things and then something happens and we realize this is all kabuki.
So I on mine, when it happened and I went through this, just my life's over and I ended up getting divorced and I, basically left the business. Now I'm back in it for my own reasons, not because I want to be in the business, but I woke up one day, Tommy was 3 and I think I just moved in here, or maybe it was right before I was living in 10,000 and I thought, I'm the happiest I've ever been. There was no newspaper coming out, there was no big meetings. I realized I
think you were also liberated from the role.
I thought back and thought, you know what I would be doing right now if I stayed there? As I said earlier, I was on a plane 287 days. I always said I was kind of like we had a Chris Johnson on the last show, and he takes the best athletes in the world and makes them better. And I was like, I felt like an athlete. Get off the plane, put the suit on, go give that speech, go take the meeting with that president, get back on the plane, go to the next spot. And for 10 years, that was my life. And I realized I wouldn't have been a present father. I would have still been on that plane. I thought I was happy. I wasn't happy. I was incredibly unhealthy because how do you land in China for a dinner and be in India for a breakfast and, head back for a premiere and, it's just physically I was unhealthy.
It's unsustainable.
Totally unsustainable. And so I either would be incredibly sick. I definitely wouldn't have been a present father and I wouldn't have appreciated.
And now I'll tell you what I think.
What do you think?
Because I've known you since you were a boy.
You've known me since I was a boy, for sure.
And it wasn't the real Ryan.
No, it was not. I got caught in a life.
That's the painful part. That's painful. It's very nice when other people say they're proud of us. But if you aren't proud of yourself and other people are proud of you, that's a very painful way to live.
It's interesting you say that. Because it really is painful because you're maybe wanting to get out of it, but everybody's telling you how great it is. And a lot of other people are benefiting from it. So you really convince yourself it's good. And you go and you push more into it, actually. I kind of became a character, of what I thought I should be.
Right.
And
it's a hard way to live.
Yeah, it was a fun way to live, but for a minute, and then it became an unhealthy way to live, and then it became
an
unsustainable way to live. No, it was definitely not me.
It was never you.
I thought it was me, and I thought I surrounded myself, I literally thought, these are my friends, this is my life, and I defined myself by that.
I was at some of those parties.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
No, it was...
And look, I remember saying to my psychiatrist one time, I said, I feel like the minute I step out my front door, I'm acting.
Yeah.
And he said to me, well, you are. And I was like, wait a minute, that's okay? And he said, well, yeah, people need you to play a role.
I was acting the moment I stepped out of my front door. It's true.
But you don't have to play that role for your whole life. And you don't have to feel like a hypocrite because it's a role, because people need you to play that role. But the question is, does that role fulfill you? Or does the dissonance of it not being the real you torture you?
Wow, like you were even more torn. I mean, I was torn, but I didn't even know I was torn. I just convinced myself.
Well, I didn't know why I felt this
But you knew you were
bitterness
playing a role.
inside. I knew I was playing a role.
I convinced myself I wasn't.
Well, here's the thing. I knew I was playing a role. I was very good at it. But I also knew that some of the role, and frankly, much of the role, because it involved helping other people, wasn't a role. I've always run toward the fire. Always. My first memory of this is when I was in 4th grade. It was Miss Hollingsworth class, Aquila Elementary School. There was a young girl, I guess, how old are you in 4th grade? I don't know, 10, 9?
You're 10.
10. And we didn't have the language for this at the time, but she was clearly, today we would say she was on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. But back then she was just weird.
Yeah.
And didn't read social cues. And I remember fantasizing, I didn't do it, but I remember fantasizing, going to Miss Hollingsworth and saying, could I spend a few minutes with her alone? Because I think I could help her.
Wow.
I wanted to help her. I don't know why, but I distinctly remember feeling for her and wanting to help her. I felt sorry for her.
Well, yeah, your role, when I say you were playing a role, like clearly you can't do what you do if you didn't want to help people.
Right.
Period.
So that's what I'm saying.
Hands
That's
down.
why it gets so complex and
But
confusing.
you have to play a role because you can't, a human can't always be
No. But
on.
and at some point the role becomes an enabler. So I've always run toward the fire. You've always been a builder. And I do both, and I've always, so I think that it's a very difficult thing to disambiguate. It's a very difficult thing to bring total clarity to. Seeing my psychiatrist for 12 years, and I don't think I really have my arms around it because life keeps changing. You know, as you grow, your body changes, your family changes, and so many things come and go. It is complex, but at least we're striving for authenticity.
I mean, that's all anybody can do because life, as you said, we don't have control. And that's one thing I realized, we don't have control.
Not much.
Like, so for me, it's interesting because you're looking at the next chapter of your life. And I think this is going to be so helpful to so many people who, here you are, you know, I'd say the most powerful rabbi in the world. I know there's a lot of powerful rabbis in Israel,
listen,
but to me, the most powerful rabbi in the world because I know how many people you help and how many people you've connected. And I know who comes to you.
And you follow me on Instagram, so you can't do better than that.
That's
power.
But I, you know, and a lot of people would say, I mean, I remember, you know, Rabbi Field stayed in the position until he couldn't anymore. You know, you've made a decision to kind of take a leap of faith.
That's right.
I think for so many of our followers,
Yes.
like people who, especially someone with anxiety, you know, you're going into the great unknown. And I was forced to do that. You know,
No, I could have stayed. I could have stayed till
and had the perfect cushy, you know.
Except that I can't do the job halfway. You know, a friend of mine called me when it was announced. He said, "Why are you doing this? You're at the top of your game, and you built something so incredible, and you could build even more, and you could do and do." And I said, I can't. I work 15 hours a day. I used to be able to do that without penalty. Now, after 2 or 3 15-hour days, I'm tired. And he said to me, well, so what? You think Joe Biden's the hardest working guy in the White House? Just sit in the chair and it gives people comfort. And I said, I'm not built that way. You can't half measure it.
That's your moral character. And that goes back to where you're not acting because you want to help people and you're not willing to sacrifice that.
I just know there's no way to halfway do that job.
Well, for so many people, I think just, you know, and that's why when we're in this show and we bring people from the top of their game, you literally just won the Super Bowl and you are being drafted by every team and you've just said, look, I can't give it my all anymore.
Well, I can't give that my all anymore.
But
I want to play a different sport.
That's what I was going to say. You're saying I can't give, you know, football my all anymore. And now, but I got something else in me that I'm going to go give
and I'm
my all
interested
to.
in the broader world.
And I think you have so much to give the broader world. And I, for me, it's funny because I never thought I'd be in tech or biotech or firefighting aviation, right? And it was going through, I think as you know, I actually successfully got relativity back, and then I was like, I can't do it anymore. I just can't. And I sold it to a hedge fund, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I found myself in short form tech, competing with TikTok, and my hobby of helicopter flying, all of a sudden I was fighting fires, and we became the largest.
I thought about you the other day because I met a guy who runs a private summer camp, and one of the things they teach the kids to do is fly a helicopter. They have the simulator, the whole thing, and he said it's their most popular specialty.
It is. I mean, as you know.
So when you retire, we can get you a gig teaching at this camp.
I'm ready. I used to fly to Temple, actually, because my helicopter pad was right next to the temple. So I would land at the temple and go into service.
You want to hear my favorite firefighting joke?
Yeah.
Okay. There's this little town. It's on fire. Main Street is going up in flames. There are about 12 different engine companies there, but the heat is so intense. The fire is so hot that all they can do is encircle the town to keep it from spreading. They can't get near it. And then in the distance, there's one fire truck coming down this dirt road, and the sirens wailing, and it goes right past all the other engine companies and rolls to a slow stop right in the middle of Main Street, in the middle of the blaze. And all these rabbis start jumping out. It's the Chabad fire truck. And they all start jumping out, axes, fire extinguishers, hoses. They're running around like fleas on a dog. In 10 minutes, the fire's out. It's unbelievable. The next week, the town throws a parade for the Chabad firefighters. And the head rabbi comes up on the stage, and the mayor says to him, Rabbi, as a thank you from our town for saving our town, here's a check for $5,000. And then a journalist says, Rabbi, what are you going to do with the money? And the rabbi says, the first thing I'm going to do is fix the brakes on that fucking truck.
Okay, that's really good. I like that one.
Sometimes you're in a fight you didn't ask for, and you have to overcome. It's happened to you. It's happened to me. And we can when we must.
If you had to give advice, like you've seen more than as much, if not more than anyone.
You have a front row seat to life.
You have a front row seat to life and death and happiness and success and sadness and failure. What would be the number one thing you would say if someone said, in part, give me the life lesson that I should take most of, someone in their 20s who's just...
In their 20s?
Yep. Someone who's just in their 20s kind of saying, like, you've seen so much. And what would you tell me about failure? What would you tell me about success?
I would say in your 20s, don't worry at all about how much money you make. Learn. Just learn your craft. Learn who you can trust. Seek out good mentors and advisors. Don't worry about how much money you're making. Worry about that in your mid-30s and 40s.
So what's the biggest thing in your 30s? That was where I was going to go next.
It's hard in a way for me to answer. I have kids in their 30s, 34 and 31. But it's so different than when I was 34 or 31. Their lives are almost discounted by a decade.
I was going to say it's more like the new 20s, right?
That's right. It really is. And there are a lot of reasons for that, sociological, economic. People are going to live longer. Our kids are going to live to be 115, 120.
A lot of 20-year-olds still live with their parents. When we were 20, that was like, that's right. You didn't do that.
That's right. Yeah. So I think I would give the same advice to 30-year-olds now. Don't worry so much. I mean, obviously you have to eat and pay the rent, but don't worry about how much money you're making. Worry about what you're learning. Learn your craft.
Learning and education and growth.
Yeah, don't worry about the money part, which is a consistent thread through this conversation, because it will come. It will come if it's important to you. But, I sometimes get this, so there's this sort of cocktail party game people play with rabbis. Like, Rabbi, what's the meaning of life? Stuff like that,
Yep.
So you actually develop this sort of quiver of flippant responses or real response is.
So what's the meaning of life?
I would say to love and be loved.
And for those people who right now aren't feeling that, what do you say to them? How do they
I would
achieve that?
remind people that love is made through giving and opening and sacrifice. We all have that ability to give to others, to sacrifice for others. And love is made.
Love is made. That's a beautiful way to look at things and a beautiful way to approach life. Actually, the kid I was telling you about who called me, told me a story. He said, I don't know why I feel like I should tell you this, but he said, very wealthy Jewish family that we know of the name, and the father's wish, when he passed away, he had one wish in his, kind of list of, here's what I want for myself. I want to be buried with my socks on. And apparently, he said, this is an absolute true story. And so he passes away.
This better be a setup for a joke.
It's not. It's not actually. And I didn't realize you were supposed to,
You're supposed to be buried in a
naked,
shroud.
in the shroud. And on
in
the
a
shroud.
linen shroud,
So,
yes. And you know, as per this materialism thing, Ryan, there's an old Yiddish expression which is, a burial shroud has no pockets.
Well, so that's where this story goes. It's not even a story, he said, is that his kids, the rabbi came and said, listen, I'm sorry. Apparently he was very religious, and he said, I'm sorry, but I can't bury your dad in
Ixnay
socks. On the socks.
Oxnays, yeah.
And the kids were like, listen, he's been the biggest donor to the temple. He's like, literally, I think it was, he told me the numbers. It was like he had built, city blocks for them. He had donated more to the town and the city. And I think even the burial ground, the cemetery was named after him. He said, I can't do it. And they had to have a family meeting. And they realized what had happened. He didn't want to be buried in his socks. He wanted the kids to realize he couldn't be buried in his socks. And it was the message he was leaving for them.
With you.
Exactly. And I got the chills when I heard this story this morning. I was like, wow.
The Talmud says the baby comes into the world grasping, as if to say, the world belongs to me. And when you die empty-handed, open-handed, as if to say, I take nothing with me.
So true.
And it's really true. And it's one of those things that's easy to talk about and hard to live.
Because again, the society teaches us that's what's important.
Yeah. But eventually you learn better.
Yep. Whether you want to or not.
Yes.
You will learn it.
Pain and loss are the great teachers.
So I know Betsy's going to kill me if I don't get you home, but I have a completely, we may or may not even use this, but I have this Chabad rabbi who, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but
who is it?
Ari Shapiro. No, Ari Shapiro.
Yeah.
True story. So I was making the movie Fighter. We were just greenlighting it, and Mark Wahlberg was coming in to close his deal with my favorite person, Ari. Not really, but
I've known him since he was 16.
But this year I posted on Instagram when John Jones, I don't know if you follow the UFC, but John Jones, one of their big fighters, said he was really pissed off at the UFC and he wanted out of the contract. And so I just posted on my Twitter at John Jones, listen, maybe we can work something out with the UFC for you to come fight for us. Because I own BKFC. I don't. It's
what is that? Fighting chickens? What is that? BKFC.
It's bare knuckle boxing. So it's the fastest growing combat sport in the world, outpacing the UFC now. And Ari, I don't know if you know William Morris owns the UFC.
That I know. So
sitting there, and it wasn't like a poaching even or an ill-intentioned post. And I actually said, maybe we can work something out with the UFC. And I was more like, because it was clear that they weren't getting along, like maybe we can work something special. So I'm sitting here, it's 10 o'clock at night, I'm right over here. My phone rings and it's a random number, which I usually don't pick up. And, I have all the birthdays on my phone and I know that it's Ari's birthday, but the one person in Hollywood I wouldn't send a gift to. And phone rings and it's like, Ryan, it's Ari. And I'm thinking like,
Rabbi Ari
first.
Yeah.
And this, by the way, has nothing to do with the story I was telling you. I just thought you'd find this funny. And I was like, Ari. He's like, it's Ari. I was like, Emmanuel? He's like, yeah. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, about to go to sleep. Put the kids to sleep. He's like, no, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, trying to poach my fucking fighters, posted about my fucking fighters? The fuck you doing? You don't need these problems. You already have enough. And I was like, this is right before they went public. And I was like, Ari, It's like, look, it's 10 o'clock at night. It's not my birthday, and I'm not calling you. And shrouded with $250 million of debt, trying to get a company public while yelling at someone about a fighting post. So I don't know who has problems, but maybe you should just go enjoy your birthday. It's like, fuck you, and he hangs up. So anyway, that was not my part of my story. This point was back when I was helping Ari and writing his business plan, and he had Wahlberg, and it was supposed to be an easy close. Our president of the company at the time was closing the deal for Wahlberg, and he calls me, he goes, Ryan, you got to come down to the office. Mark's here. And I was like, we have the deal closed. Just close it. It's like, no, you have to come down here. And I'm like, so I walked down to his office. There's Mark Wahlberg, Ari Emanuel, his manager, Lev, and a rabbi, a Chabad rabbi, 23-year-old Chabad rabbi. I'm like, oh, I see. He doesn't. So I sit down, and everybody says hi, and the rabbi starts kind of negotiating and asking questions. And I was like, Mark, you're Catholic, right? He's like, yeah, this is my rabbi. So
Chabad is everywhere.
Nice enough, rabbi.
Yeah.
Finished the deal, whatever. For the next 6 months, this kid showed up, sat in my office trying to get a meeting with me until Daniel over there one day says, you've come in every day for 6 months. I'm going to get you in. And he comes in and he says, I just want to put tefillin on with you. And I'd never put tefillin on, so I put it on. And I'm like, what do I owe you? Thinking he wanted money. He said, no, I don't want any money. I literally just want to put tefillin on with you. And he brought me a honey cake for the,
must have been Sukkot.
It was Sukkot, yep. And I was like, you don't want a donation or anything? No. And he's like, I'd just like to come back at some point. So that was 2010. I still see him every week.
Yeah.
And we sit and we talk.
He's relationship building.
But at this point, we've become friends and we just talk kind of religious, but he's very religious and he's a great kid. And he's learning. I've watched him go through this mental health struggle, actually, because he grew up, this is what he was supposed to do.
He was groomed.
And everything he does is about helping other people. He goes to the jails, but he's literally gone through this existential crisis now of like, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? The irony is he always asks me about science. And this is what I was going to throw out to you, because when you grow up like that, he can't put science and religion. Like science can't exist for him. Meaning the way he thinks is the earth is 5,000, I forget what 820.
85. It's 5,784.
Years old. So
it'll be 85.
Yeah. So I said to him, let me ask you a question. And I don't know, I just came up with this, and I'm just curious, as a rabbi, your thoughts on this. I said, well, it strikes me when, I'm reading these, like, on this day God created this, and on this day God created that. And so on one day he created the sun and the moon, right? But on the other day he said, let there be light.
Opposite. Light is created before the sun and the moon.
Right. So why is there two separate days? Because you would think with the sun, and then I kind of said, what if light, he meant time? And time is relative.
Well, here's what I think he meant. First of all, it's astute to have picked that up. And let's assume that the people who wrote the Torah were not idiots. They knew that when the sun came up, it was light, and
right.
When it went down, it was dark. They weren't fools.
Yeah.
Creating light before the sun was a sermon to us. It was a sermon saying to us, those people who worship the sun and worship the star? The sun is a vessel for light, far deeper and more profound. The sun is a container, a vessel. It's not the originator of light.
It's just the reflection of it.
Don't worship the sun. Light comes from a greater source. And both a literal and metaphorical light.
Yep.
And now the reason he can't get there is because of the sect of Judaism in which he was raised.
Yep.
He has to see the Torah as a book of facts.
Correct, not as
I read the Torah as a book of truths.
Right.
When my daughter was 5 years old, it's interesting, we're talking about this tonight, during Hanukkah. She got a Hanukkah menorah, which was ceramic, and it was Noah's Ark.
Yep.
Noah was the lead candle, the shamash, and then there were 2 of 4 different types of animals, and those were the 8 candles. So I decided I should read her the story of Noah and the Ark. So I read it to her, and she looks at me at 5 years old, and she goes, then Noah got all those animals on a boat and kept them alive and cleaned up all the poop and fed them, and then it stopped raining, and then they went out and created all the animals. He's like, Dad.
She just knew it was.
Yeah. Now, I had a choice. I could have taken the path of your Chabad rabbi and said, but Hannah, God can do anything. Who are we to know, right?
Yeah.
Instead, I said, Hannah, you're right. But that's not what the story is about. The story is about us being responsible for all the creatures on this planet. That story is trying to teach us a truth, not facts. That's how you can make room for religion and science. They ask different questions about why we're here and how things work. They ask different questions. I mean, saying that you don't believe in science because you believe in religion is like saying you don't believe in math because you believe in love.
Well, let me be clear. He never said he doesn't believe in science. I'll say, because I'll bring up, that they just, with the new telescope, showed that the universe is older than 13.8 billion years.
And constantly expanding.
And has been expanding.
So what is one of the Hebrew words for God? Ein Sof, the one without end.
Right.
The infinite one. It's the same thing.
But for him, what was crazy is, because he's always like, he asks me, because we do this back and forth, and he always says, well, what do you think? And so I actually said to him, for him to relate, I said, well, what? God didn't, as I said, didn't say he created sun and let there be light, but let there be light. Now, what's light? Light is time. Space. I explained space-time to him. And I said, so who's to say what a day or a year or 10 years or a decade or 1,000 years or a million years was?
And there is a thing that I refer to often as God time. Yep. It's another way of saying to people, this is out of our hands.
Yep.
This is on God time.
But it's the first time he actually said,
yeah,
maybe that makes sense.
Look, since you're an Einstein freak like I am, okay, what is the unified field theory really? What is it other than this idea that there's a single unifying power to all of existence?
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
We're all connected by one thing and we just can't see it.
And what is the Shema?
What connects us all?
The oneness.
Yeah.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Not the sun god and the moon god, not the clashing of war and peace. It's all a single wholeness.
Well, since you brought it up earlier, the best analogy I ever heard of the unified field theory is we're in the ocean, we're all fish in the ocean. We don't know we're in an ocean. We're connected by the ocean.
I don't know who discovered water, but it wasn't the fish.
Right. So if we're all just fish in an ocean and don't realize we're all connected by an ocean, a ripple on this side of, the Pacific Ocean is hitting the other side in some way.
It's the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
It's the butterfly effect.
And we're connected by that.
And we do know it, some of us. That's what it means to be a spiritual person.
Yeah, you feel the connection.
You feel the oneness. And therefore, there is no such thing as a small blessing.
No.
Everything is a blessing.
That is how I feel every day now. And I didn't before. It took me the failure to learn that.
And that failure was a blessing. And I'm not saying it didn't hurt. Blessings hurt.
It probably hurt almost more than anything in my life, and I would never take it back because it made me who I am.
That's right.
So I could talk to you for hours. I know you have to get home for Hanukkah.
Gotta light the menorah.
What would you like to leave, if there's any last thoughts of just wisdom you can impart on anything having to do with people who are going through a failure right now, people who, have struggle, anything you want to tell the world right now? We've got, obviously, we didn't touch upon it because I'm sure you're spending your days on it. Israel and conflict and the world torn apart.
It feels like the bottom is falling out of the world.
A lot of people, I saw a dear friend the other night who's one of the most successful people ever. And I asked him if he felt...
What does that mean?
Most financially successful people ever. And he's about 70, and I asked him if he ever felt anxiety, because I was telling him about my anxiety. He said, for the first time, I feel it now. That means a lot of people. If he's feeling it, a lot of people are feeling it. What do you say to the world right now?
Most people are good. Most people are wounded, and when people behave badly, it's because they're wounded. And without empathy, we have no hope. we have to somehow find the ability to see the humanity in the other person. You know, speaking of Bible as truth and metaphor, the 9th plague of the Passover story, the plague of darkness. So there's a conversation among the sages of the Talmud about what was the nature of this darkness. Was it like a 24-hour night? Was it an eclipse? Like what did that mean? And the answer, without walking you through the whole conversation, the answer that they give is, it was so dark that no one could get up mitachtav, which means up from underneath themselves, from their own point of view. In other words, the ancient Israelites and the ancient Egyptians could not see the humanity in the other. There was no empathy, and that is the darkest, blackest kind of world.
Feels like we're there.
It does. And so we have to turn that tide. And we have to find a way to accept that if you prick us, we all bleed. All of us. And I'm all for destroying evil. You know that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
I don't have a problem with destroying people who are incapable of empathy. They are bad for the world.
Yep.
That's evil. When you are incapable of seeing the humanity in another, when you are only capable of objectification, you are evil.
I totally agree with you.
And when you are able to see the humanity in the other, when you are able to understand the pain of another, you are on the path to peace. Woe unto us if we're not. And I don't want to end on such a dark note. I will say that I'm very hopeful. Remember, we talked about punctuated equilibrium.
Yep.
These traumatic events force us to get a hold of ourselves, to get up from underneath our own position, to have some doubt.
You know, I was realizing the other day, because it's such a dark time, but I did realize, like, this kind of what you're saying, which is, as much as there's division and, you know, just conflict and anger, and I'm starting to see just as much unification.
Of course.
People coming together.
That's
from
right.
all different parts of life, and just standing together and just head on hitting evil together.
That's right.
And it's like, in a weird way, it took this to bring a lot of people together.
Yeah. Punctuated equilibrium.
Punctuated.
All right,
We're gonna use that from now on.
My favorite
Punctuated
joke
equilibrium.
about hope and pessimism.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the Jewish pessimist says, oh my God, things could not be worse. And the Jewish optimist says, of course they could.
That's a really, okay. We're going to end on that, guys. Thank you for joining us in Failure. We are so blessed and so lucky that we've had Rabbi Leder, Stephen Leder, join us, who you know, is by far, to me, I'll say the most spiritual and most diverse person I know. And we are so lucky to have someone who has seen so much, spent so much time with us. And I hope we can have him back. And I'm sure that this will definitely not be the last time you'll see him in front of the camera. And I have a feeling
That trapeze is coming from somewhere.
I have a
we
feeling
don't know
you're going
where.
to be seen a lot more soon.
We'll see.
But
See. I love you, right?
And I love you, and you're such a big part of my life. And you know, the older we get, the more we realize those people who are just family and part of our lives. And
you know, when you go through the darkness, I always tell people, when you fail, the people who matter don't mind, and the people who mind
don't matter.
They don't matter.
That was the hardest lesson for me to learn.
It
I
is.
learned it the hard way.
Yep.
And you know what? The best lesson I had.
Yeah, you're carrying less.
It's liberating.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh. This was great.
You're my bar mitzvah boy.
I know, Gum. I'll always be your first.
Always.